Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be reviewing The Forgotten Highlander by Alistair Urquhart, an incredible memoir of survival during one of history's darkest periods, World War II. So I first caught notice of this book when I saw Chris Williamson of Modern Wisdom fame. He's, I guess, promoted the book a few times and mentioned it a lot, so I added it to my TBR list a few years ago. Just recently read it, my first book of 2025. This book is horrific. It's one of the most disturbing things I've ever read in my life. Proper nightmare feel, I would say. But equally, one of the most important things I've read recently. We shouldn't forget our history. However, this was one of the probably most intense history lessons I've had in a while. So Alistair, the author, Alistair Urquhart, he led a very quiet life for 50 years after he returned home from World War II. And he wrote this book in the early 2000s after being somewhat frustrated and angered by how politicians and people of prominence at the time were downplaying the horror of war. One of my favorite poems of all time, possibly my favorite poet of all time, is Wilfred Owen. Anyone who's been to a UK British school probably knows who he is. The reason I respected him so much because he never shied away from the realities of describing the horrors of war. And now when I think of World War II, I won't just think of Wilfred Owen. I'll be thinking of Alistair Urquhart, two people who really didn't shy away from describing the grim reality of war. But yeah, stick around as I break down why this book really gripped me, particularly its emotional impact at the end, and why I consider it a must-read. No matter your interests. So, Forgotten Highlander is the true story of Alistair Urquhart, previously mentioned. He was a Scottish soldier who was captured by the Japanese during World War II. I'm not really sure how to describe this book. It's very difficult to know where to start, but his journey throughout the book is nothing short of harrowing and disturbing. It's a word I'm going to keep going back to a lot. He survived forced labour camps on the infamous Death Railway in Burma at the time, and the sinking of the Kachidoku Maru, which was a very prominent Japanese warship torpedoed by an American submarine. But what makes this memoir truly unforgettable, I think why it will live with me forever, is the author's account of how he's enduring these horrors. You can tell he's definitely from an older generation. His writing just oozes a kind of pre-generation, a very long, the charm of a generation a long time ago, with a bit more class and consideration in how people spoke. But yeah, despite these imaginable horrors he faced, he found a way to survive and eventually return home to share his story. But so on the face of it, if you look at a description of the events he went through, this book feels like almost absurdist and unbelievable with the amount of punishment Alistair endured. So Alistair gets conscripted during the start of World War II when he's 18 years old. He leaves Scotland, leaves all his childhood friends, leaves his saying goodbye to his family, unsure of when he'll be able to see them again. And he travels and he ends up stationed in Singapore as representing the British Army to defend the interests of the British. And while he's recounting his childhood, let's say, in Scotland and his initial experience with the army, you can really sense something is very something through the writing, the way he kind of nostalgizes, is that a word? His time before the horrors. You can really sense something dark is going to happen. So yeah, eventually the Japanese attack Singapore and take everything over, capture the whole island area, and they take him and many other soldiers as prisoners. So he starts off, he's forced to march for weeks on end, very little sleep. If he shows too many signs of weakness, he'll be beaten. His feet are cut up, he's in bad physical condition, but bizarrely, this is just the start. It gets much worse. So from the start of his capture to the end, I think he's in this prison camp for about 5 to 6 years. He contracts every tropical disease. Just one of these would probably give me a very hard time. But he gets dysentery, malaria, tropical ulcers, burns, infections, even eventually radiation poisoning. His stomach shrinks. We'll get more to that later. But he eventually becomes part of a forced labor group that's ordered to build the bridge over the River Kwai. He's treated appallingly, of course, as expected during a prisoner of war. But this is one incident that really, well, he describes in vivid detail during the book how a Korean prison guard tries to sexually assault him. And Alistair, yes, this really is not a fun book. Alistair fights him off, but words of the incident get back to the Japanese prison guards, who don't like troublemakers. So to punish him, they lock him away for 3 days in a hole, during which he had no idea how long this punishment would end. But he's only surrounded by basically a giant, it's described as like a metal tin. During the baking, the sun in this part of the world must be, they would just bake him alive. The only respite he had in these 3 days was every 24 hours, the prison guards would open the door quickly and throw a bowl of rice in, which was very clean, contained maggots. But yeah, I'm shocked he was able to survive this. I don't think I could. 3 days in the baking hot sun. He must have been dehydrated and seriously ill. But after 3 days, they took him out, considered him somewhat resilient, and put him back to work. But yeah, the brutal conditions don't stop. The prison guards destroy. I was going to say destroy the morale, but actually physically destroy some of the prisoners. There's stories of how they split the prisoners in half by dragging them apart, pulling them by ropes. Yeah, it's really it's a very difficult book to read. Eventually, all the prisoners are shoveled onto a Japanese warboat. Now, this Japanese warboat doesn't have the Red Cross symbol, which signals to attackers that this boat is carrying prisoners of war. So he's shoved into, let's say, the cargo of the boat, surrounded by lots of different soldiers, where he's forced to be shoulder to shoulder. There's no room to sit down. The floor is covered in feces, urine, and dead bodies, composing bodies, the people who couldn't survive that long. He was in there for a few days. Similar story. The only respite he had was when they would open the door and throw morsels of rice in, where the prisoners would have to push and shove each other to get as much as they could. But yeah, eventually, because there was no Red Cross on the boat, an American, I think it's like a submarine or a war vessel, torpedoes the ship. The ship blows up, explodes, and Alistair describes it as being sucked out, being carried along with the waves into the open water. He's swimming away from the wreckage as it sinks. He mentions due to his training, he's aware that when the ship goes down, it will take down the whole area with him. He swims through oil, describes the oil in his mouth just burning his insides, and he ends up attached to this pits of flotsam. But another Japanese guy has the same idea, and they begin fighting over this piece of flotsam, desperate to survive. Luckily, Alistair, a bit of luck finally, Alistair knocks him away. Yeah, and it gets even worse. After a few days at sea, being burnt alive by the sun, he winds up washed ashore back in Japanese territory, who recapture him and put him back to work. And it's just, it's never ending. And back to work, then back on another hell boat. The hell boat is the official description of these kind of boats where they lock prisoners of war in. But this time, he was locked in the hole for 3 days with no food and no water. There was no pretense of taking care of them this time. And many prisoners of war went insane, started killing each other, and even describing vampirism, not just cannibalism. They were killing their fellow soldiers. It's really weird. It's really difficult to imagine. Killing their fellow soldiers to eat them and drink their blood. Properly disturbing. But eventually he makes it back into the area of the Nagasaki atomic bomb. When the bomb drops, he gets knocked back due to the blast. He explores the remains of desolation nearby. He becomes exposed to radiation poisoning, which affected the rest of his life. And towards the end of the war, he ended at 82 pounds, which is something like 37 kilograms, I think, as a grown man. I really struggle to comprehend that. The Japanese start to lose, of course. His history is well known. He's eventually rescued, makes it back home, but the last 10 to 20 pages document his readjustment to civilian life, and obviously who can ever be the same after that, right? This book doesn't just recount historical events, it really takes you in the heart of them with that POV, personal perspective of World War II history. There's no greater source than someone who's actually there, right? What sets this book apart from other accounts of the war is the personal story and the author's ability to tell the story with raw honesty and vivid detail. He really doesn't sugarcoat anything, and it really makes the whole thing much more impactful. The historical context is meticulously, I would say, woven throughout the personal narrative. You're fully aware of where Alistair's at and where the war is at. Through these experiences, you get a deeper understanding of the human cost of war, especially those for the prisoners of war. But one of the book's biggest strengths is the emotional depth. Every chapter, even every line, you feel Alistair Urquhart's pain, his despair, but also his determination to survive. When he's picturing people back home or thinking of Christmas back home, it's really strange because the writing makes you feel like you're right there with him. Whether he's battling illnesses, enduring beatings and sexual assault, surviving against all odds. It's very strange to describe, but in a strange way, this book was kind of uplifting to me instead of depressing. Like, he experiences so much, and it's just a miracle he survives the whole thing, not just one incident. He keeps on surviving, and it really makes you respect humanity in a way. I'll be honest, this book is really not an easy read. It's a necessary one, definitely. We should never forget our own history. But there were moments when, man, I just had to kind of stop to take in the overwhelming sheer brutality described in the absurdist situations. But yeah, what stood out to me was his resilience and his refusal to let his captors break his spirit. This story isn't just about survival, it's about hope, courage, and the importance of remembering the past. And it's a very sobering reminder of the cost of war and what humanity can descend into given the right circumstances. So who should read this book? I would like to recommend this book to everyone, to be honest. If you're a history enthusiast, this is just, you've probably heard this book already and should definitely have picked it up. World War II nerds, definitely this book is a must read, but also I think it's important that everyone takes the time to read books like this. I'd recommend for mature readers. Wouldn't recommend it to young teenagers. But if you're prepared for an emotional, eye-opening journey, Forgotten Highlander is well worth your time. I cannot recommend this book strongly enough. I'll be talking about this book or thinking about it for the rest of my life, I feel like. So in conclusion, Forgotten Highlander is unforgettable, disturbing, and it sheds light on for me, lesser known sides of World War II history, especially coming from the UK. We're not often taught about prisoner of wars in the Asian part of it. But Urquhart's story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit, and it will stay with me long after you've turned the final page. It reminds me of the feeling I had when I read books like Eddie Jacquo's Happiest Man on Earth or Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. It's impossible not to finish these books without feeling grateful for what's around you. I wake up now, I like to practice gratitude every day, but I wake up and I feel so thankful for living a safe and happy life. Much how I feel after watching the news these days, to be honest. I wish to end on this quote. Life is worth living, and no matter what it throws at you, it's important to keep your eyes on the prize of the happiness that will come. Even when the death railway reduced us to little more than animals, humanity, in the shape of our saintly medical officers, triumphed over barbarism. Beautiful book. So what about you? Have you read The Forgotten Highlander? Are you interested in reading it? Can you recommend any similar books that can give me the same feeling of gratitude? And it's heavy. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed me talking about this book, please like, share, subscribe. I'll be posting more book reviews and recommendations throughout the year. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye, friends.